So this talks all about Vi, or VI. It gets pronounced both ways. Vi is an editor that got created for the Unix operating system in 1976 by Bill Joy. Then, 15 years later, Vim got created. So Vim stands for VI Improved, and they basically added cross-platform GUI, Windows, Linux, Mac extension support, scripting support, and a whole bunch of other stuff. This talk is not about those editors. Both editors have a unique way of interacting with the keyboard, and that's what this talk's all about. This way of interacting with the keyboard has become so popular that pretty much all editors nowadays have some form of extension to emulate this way of interacting with the keyboard. So for example, Visual Studio has VS Vim, Visual Studio Code has VSCode Vim, Atom has Vim Mode Plus, Sublime has Vintage Vim. LinkPad, a fantastic tool. I'd really recommend checking this out if you don't use it. Earlier this year they added Vi mode. Built in, it's just a preference. You can just check a checkbox and you've got Vi. The JetBrains IDEs. So it's the .NET user group, so Rider is probably more of interest to most of our members. But all of the JetBrains IDEs are built on the IntelliJ platform, and they all have IDEA. So this screenshot is the installation wizard of Rider, and this is the featured plugin part of this installation wizard. And you can see it's the first one, so it's really popular. It does come with a warning though. It's only recommended if you're already familiar with Vim. Now, I don't want to say that Vim is hard, because it's not hard. If I can do it, anyone can do it. But it does take time and commitment. It's going to be really frustrating when you first start. It's got quite a steep learning curve. Once you've been using it for a while and it becomes more intrinsic and you're using it without thinking about it, it then becomes much more powerful. But when you first start, it's going to be frustrating, so bear that in mind when you first start. Also, Vim is not for everyone. So this talk is not saying that everyone should be using Vim. This talk is an out of interest piece. So let's standard keyboard. In a normal editor, if you press D, it will type the character D. If you press the 5 key, it will type the character 5. If you type for each, if, else, when, then, it will type those words. Vi is exactly the same when you're in insert mode. So when you're in insert mode, the keyboard works pretty much as you'd expect. However, if you press the escape key, you then get dropped down into command mode. This is also called normal mode. Depending on where you read, some people refer to it as command mode, some people will refer to it as normal mode. Vi has different modes, and command mode not to be confused with command line mode, which we'll talk about later. But I prefer calling this command mode rather than normal mode because it does what it says on the tin. So let's start off with some very basic examples. U. So U stands for undo. That's fairly self-explanatory. P stands for paste. So remember, these are keys when you're in command mode. So Vim has its own concept of a clipboard, which we'll talk about a bit later. But for the time being, P is paste. I insert. So this drops you back into insert mode. So you'll be, when you're using Vi, you'll be swapping backwards and forwards between insert mode and command mode all the time. So I insert mode, escape to go back to command mode. And there's other ways to get into insert mode as well. This is just an example. HJKL, so these actually replace the cursor keys. So you might be wondering, why would I replace the cursor keys with HJKL when they're down here? So you've got to remember, when Bill Joy first created Vi, he was using one of these. It didn't actually have cursor keys, and you can see that the HJKL keys do have arrow keys on them, so that's where it came from. However, obviously nowadays we do have cursor keys, but one great thing about Vi is when you're using Vi, you can keep your hands in the touch typing position. You can use all commands, which I'll show you shortly, without moving your hands away from the touch typing position. When you're not using Vi, you're constantly moving your hands from the touch typing position to your cursor keys, back to the mouse, back, and it's not a huge loss of productivity, but it is that it's kind of hard to explain. When you're using Vi and your hands are in the same position, things just flow a lot better, especially when you know the commands without thinking about it. The code almost flows and morphs, and you're almost thinking things to happen. It's really hard to explain, but it's very powerful. So I'm going to jump over to a demo now because it's easy to explain as I'm doing. So this is VSCode. This C# file is from the Serilog GitHub repository, an absolutely fantastic logging framework, but don't worry about what the code's doing. I just wanted an arbitrary C# file to demo Vim with. So you can see in the extensions I've got Vim here. Almost 5 million downloads, so it's really popular. So you can see where the cursor is here. You can see it's a block, so when it's a block, this is command mode. If I press I for insert, that goes into the cursor becomes a vertical line, and so that shows that you're in insert mode. I can type some characters, escape, goes back into the block, and then I can press U for undo, which is obviously a command we've seen. So Vim is split into different categories of commands. One is navigation. So we've seen a basic example of navigation with the cursor keys, the H, J, K, L keys. You've also got W. W stands for word. So that moves one word at a time. You've got B for back, which does the reverse. You've got things like GG, top of the file, capital G, bottom of the file. We've got find, so F followed by a character finds that character on the same line. So remember how I said earlier that some of the Vi commands are combinations. So if I press F, can you see the cursor, the mouse cursor? You can see down here it's typing F. So that means that Vi is now waiting for me to type another key sequence. So if I press comma, that's now found the comma. If I press semicolon, that goes to the next instance of what you're finding. So if I go to the start of the line, I'm doing that with 0, and do F open parenthesis, that's found the open parenthesis. If I do FA, that's found A, semicolon, finding all the A's. You've also got, you can search between the entire file, across the entire file. So if I press backslash now, you can see down here again in the status bar, we've got a backslash. I can now type what I want to find, so message. And now I can press N to go next, and Shift and N to go back. Okay. Another navigation command is very similar to the find. So if I do F open parenthesis, if the cursor is now on the open parenthesis. If I do T open parenthesis, that does exactly the same, except the cursor is one character to the left. Now this becomes useful, we'll see shortly. So let's move over to editing commands now. So if I press X, that's deleting the character under the cursor. If I press D for delete, you can see again in the status bar here, it says the D, and Vi is waiting for another key press. So this is where we can combine different commands together. So do you remember the navigation commands? I can now do, say if I press W, that's done delete W, delete word, DW. So basically this is deleting from where the cursor was up until where the cursor is at the end of the navigation command. So if I, do you remember find F comma, find the comma? If I go here, if I do DF comma, delete find comma. So you can see how this, you can start mixing and matching these different commands. Delete find open parenthesis. So this has deleted the parenthesis. Remember the T parenthesis did the character to the left? So if I do delete T, DT parenthesis, so delete till parenthesis, delete till parenthesis, that's deleted up until the parenthesis. You've also, so if my cursor's here, I could do DI, delete inside parenthesis, DI parenthesis, that's deleted anywhere within the parenthesis. So I can be anywhere along here, DI parenthesis, and it's deleted it. Likewise, so if I've got something like this, I can do DI quote, delete inside quote. So you can see it is actually using English, even though it seems like random characters. There's lots of patterns and you can combine them in different ways. So like here, I can do delete inside squiggly brackets. I don't know what this is actually called. Squiggly brackets will do, and it's deleting inside the squiggly brackets. I'll do that. There's another one, there's CI. So if I'm here and I do CI parenthesis, change inside parenthesis, this is just like the delete, except it's dropped me into insert mode. So I can start typing something else. So if I'm here, CI quote, change inside quote, and start typing whatever I want to replace it with. So another useful thing is ranges. So if I type 10, so a number followed by a command, it'll do that 10 times. So if I've typed 10, and you can see down here it's got 10 here, and press J for down, so that's the down arrow, it's jumped down 10. If I do, remember DD, delete line, if I do 5DD, that's deleted 5 lines. If I do 5 delete word, that's deleted 5 words. Another command that's quite useful is the period, so the full stop. So that repeats the last action. So if I do DW and then period, that's repeating that DW. If I do DD period, that's deleting that delete line. If I do 5DD, deleting 5 line, then period, that's deleting 5 lines at a time. So when I mentioned earlier that Vi has a clipboard, when I'm saying here that DD is delete line, that's actually a bit of a lie. It's actually cutting the line. So that's actually put that deletion into the clipboard. So if I go down here and do P for paste, do you remember that from the slides? So that's pasted what I've just deleted. So this is quite useful if I want, say I want to swap these two lines around, DDP, so let's swap them around, delete line DD, then paste. So pasting, let's just find an example. Oops, that didn't work. Let's just be here. Say I've got something here. So say I'm going to DE, so I'm going to DE, delete at the end of the word. So I've now got this in the clipboard. So I've just done a paste. And do that. If I do P, that's pasted after where the cursor was. If I do Shift P, that pastes before the cursor was. So it's useful knowing those two, getting used to when to press Shift P and when to press P. If you want to copy text without deleting it, you can use the Y key. Y stands for Yang, and that's Vim terminology for copy. So let's move down here, I think. If I void blah. So if I'm here and I do you remember DI parenthesis, delete inside parenthesis? If I do YI parenthesis, so that's copied, yanked everything inside the parenthesis. So you can see this is using the same pattern. And then I can do Shift P and paste that straight in there. So it's nice and quick. If I'm here, find, open parenthesis, yank inside parenthesis, up here, Shift P. It sounds complicated when you're not used to it, but when it becomes subconscious, this becomes really fast. Vim has also got something else called macros. So if I copy this line a few times, I can do, so a macro can be assigned to any alphanumeric character. So if I press Q, and we can again see down here we've got Q, and if I press Q again, or if I press any alphanumeric character, I tend to default to QQ because it's easier, then that's now recording a macro into the Q register, so against the Q character. So you can record these again, you can record multiple macros against the different keys. So now I can, if I did say for example, find comma, df comma, delete find comma, so say I'm deleting that middle one, and then down 0 to the start of the line, and then I press Q again, so you can see down here recording, Q again, that's stopped recording now. So then if I do the quote mark, so the apostrophe, followed by the Q, so followed by the register I recorded that macro in, you can see it's repeating that now. So if I mentioned before about the dot, so delete that, dot is repeating that atomic action. If you need a longer recording, you can use macros. Another mode Vim has is command line mode. So command line mode, if I press the semicolon, you can see down here we've got a semicolon. You can enter commands here. So a very basic one, 1, 2, 3. So that's a number that takes you to the line number. Another one might be sort. If I type sort, obviously not very useful in a code file, but if you've got a data file like a CSV or something, that might be useful. U for undo. There's actually lots and lots of commands you can type in here. Another example is find and replace. So if I do percentage, so percentage means every line in the file. S, substitute, backslash. I can now put a search term. So I could put content, backslash, what I want to replace it with. Let's say blah. I can do G. G means for each line you're making this replacement, replace all instances on that line. And content here can be a regular expression. I'm not doing regular expression here, but it could be a regular expression. Press enter. That's now replaced them all in the file. And there's plenty of other, actually another example. So down here again, I've pressed the colon. One common joke in Vi is how do you quit? And this isn't an issue with an extension with VSCode, but if you're using Vim on the command line in Linux, then lots of people have trouble quitting. So if you press in command line mode, if you press colon W for write, so that would save the file. And I could just do, if I do that now, that's saved it. If I do Q, that's quit, or I could do WQ for write and quit. So that's how to exit in Vim. And I think that's enough for this video, because this is all I covered in the lightning talk. Hopefully that's given everyone a good overview. If I jump back to my slides now, I want to end with a few tips. So this keyboard, if we go back a few slides, do you remember this is the ADM3A terminal that Bill Joy used? This is the keyboard, and you can see the position of the escape key is quite handy. You You can keep your hands in the touch typing position, and with your little finger it's nice and easy to press that escape key. With a modern keyboard, the escape keys tend to be much higher up. It's a bit out of the way. I would highly recommend remapping your caps lock to your escape key, because no one uses the caps lock key anyway. If you use Windows, there's Sharp Keys, which is a really nice utility to remap your keys. There are ones for Mac and Linux, and I don't know if them. I'm a Windows user, so I'm not sure what, but I'm sure Google would tell you, give you some tools to do that with. And yeah, so I'd really recommend, if you're going to use Vim, I would recommend remapping your caps lock to your escape key. I'd also recommend Googling for Google Images for VI cheat sheet. Find one you like. This is an example of one, and print it out and put it on your desk. So as you're learning VI, you've got a reference by your side. And finally, there's actually a Vim game. This is an online game, and this starts off at the very basics with the HJKL and takes you through, it gamifies learning Vim. So this is a really cool idea, and so I'd recommend playing around with this. And here's that example of how to exit VI again. So thank you very much for listening to this talk. I'll include various links in the description, and also it would be great to hear your feedback. Thank you. Bye.